This shouldn't and can't be about politics. This is a matter of national security. Terrorists like Al-Qaeda and ISIL aren't suddenly going to stop plotting against us at midnight tomorrow. And we shouldn't surrender the tools that help keep us safe. It would be irresponsible.
That was President Obama in his weekly address released early this morning. He wants the Senate to renew provisions from the Patriot Act, allowing the National Security Agency to collect massive amounts of data on millions of our phone calls and web records. The law, and thus the NSA program, expires at midnight tomorrow unless the Senate acts. Kentucky Senator and presidential hopeful Rand Paul released a statement today saying he will block any Senate vote. So what does this mean? Major change for our safety here at home and for Americans around the world, or not? Former Assistant FBI Director Steve Pomerantz joins us now. Who's right on this?
The president's right. These tools that they gave us in the intelligence and law enforcement community after 9/11 have been significant and important in the prevention of terrorist acts in this country. And those are tools that we vitally need to continue the overwhelmingly successful record. Not perfect, but overwhelmingly successful. Not perfect.
But it's been good. But the FBI, their own Inspector General, has essentially said that they cannot point to a single terrorist act that was stopped because of the provisions in the Patriot Act that Senator Paul doesn't want extended.
Yeah, I think looking for some piece of information that we glean from the Patriot Act and making that the center point of this argument is not the way to go. Stopping terrorist acts is the result of a collection of bits and pieces of intelligence information that ultimately come together.
This is the whole idea of connecting the dots.
You know, the buzzword after 9/11 we heard over and over again, the failure to connect the dots. The dots that we need to connect are individual pieces of intelligence information.
So what you're saying is there's a dot out there that comes from this NSA program that could be used to prevent a new terrorist attack.
And to try to point to it as the only reason that we were able to prevent an attack is not a reasonable way to go. These are kind of puzzles that we need bits and pieces of information to put together, analyze, and then be able to stop the attacks. And these bits and pieces come from the tools that have been provided to us by the Patriot Act.
I want to get back to what Senator Paul had to say. Here's another quote from him. He put out a statement today. Tomorrow I will force the expiration of the NSA illegal spy program. I am ready and willing to start the debate on how we fight terrorism without giving up our liberty. Sometimes when the problem is big enough, you just have to start over. Is there a way to balance liberty and security in a way that isn't as, shall we say, unpalatable as what we see the NSA doing now?
Sure. It's a reasonable debate. You don't want to give up all your liberties and your privacy in the name of security. And there has to be a reasonable balance. And to have an argument and a discussion to find that balance is the appropriate thing to do. What I'm saying is I think the law as it stands today is a fair balance. Not that it couldn't be tweaked, and some of the recommendations that we're hearing are reasonable. Do the phone companies hold the metadata as opposed to the government holding it? That's probably a reasonable place where we can find some area of compromise. When does law enforcement, the FBI or the NSA, need to go to the FISA court to get a specific authority? We could probably tweak that. But by the way, every time we do that, and every time we add another bureaucratic level between what the intelligence and law enforcement community needs to do, we add a time element, and time can be critical, a bureaucratic stumbling block. So that's an issue as well.
No, I understand that. I guess the problem from the law enforcement standpoint is you hear from the law enforcement intelligence communities, trust us, we need this.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, we realize that so much of our personal information, of what was private information before, is now somewhere up in the cloud. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so much we've heard so many times we're not doing this, only to find out that the NSA is doing this.
I don't know that they've denied. I would argue for you to that particular point. But look, there is an element of trust. These agencies, the FBI, the NSA,
can trust them?
Yes, I think they make an absolute legitimate attempt to comply with the law. Do they ever exceed their authorities? Yes. Sometimes the authority is a little bit murky. Sometimes individuals make mistakes, and they normally own up to it. They're not in this for profit. They're not in this. Their sole concern is the protection of America. Unlike, I would point out to you, private enterprises such as Google and others that collect much more information.
Or politicians who have their own agenda. For sure.
Yes.
All right,
yes.
former FBI Director Steve Pomerantz, we're going to be back to you as this develops, obviously. See how many dots there are out there. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks. Liz?